The day Tessa vanished, Ohio smelled like rain and hot metal. I remember it because I was hunched over a Chevy on Lift 3, forearms slick with oil, when the radio cut to breaking news about a winning ticket sold at the Speedway off Route 33. The guys whistled and joked about never seeing me again if I got lucky. I tightened a belt, wiped my hands on a shop rag, and didn't think twice. Luck was something that happened to other people. By dusk, my phone went silent. Tessa always texted when she was driving home. Little snapshots of the road, light spilling over cornfields, a country song stuck in her head. That night, nothing. I walked across the gravel lot, the stones popping under my boots, and watched the sky bruise purple. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled like bins dragged across a concrete floor. I thought she'd fallen asleep at her sister's, or got stuck late at the catering job she'd picked up after the bakery cut hours. Morning proved me wrong. Half her closet gone. Coffee mug abandoned with a pale crescent of lipstick drying on the rim. The plants by the kitchen sink looked thirsty the way I did. Roots splayed, stuck in place, waiting for something that wasn't coming back. The silence in our rental was a new kind of noise. 2 days later, I saw her on TV. The local station had the winner on the courthouse steps, flanked by a lottery rep in a shiny suit. 29.8 million cash option. Tessa wore the blue dress I always said made her look like June sky over Lake Erie. Her hair had that loose wave she'd taught herself from YouTube. She didn't look nervous. She looked lifted, like gravity had finally blinked. "Plans?" the reporter asked. "Move," she said, easy as a breath. "Start fresh." I stood in our kitchen with the mug still on the counter, and the plants drooping and a sunbeam cutting across the vinyl floor like a road out. The TV light flickered on the fridge. The number, 29.8 nanmore, burned in the corner like a hot weld. I waited for her eyes to find the camera and send a signal that meant, "I'll be home soon, Nate." Instead, she smiled like she'd already left. People said she owed me something. People who love simple stories always say that. They don't see the nights you sit at the table writing checks that don't clear until Friday, or how you measure coffee so thin you can see the bottom of the pot. They don't see a woman who carried shame like a second purse on her shoulder. They don't see the way I tried to hold both of us up and kept dropping pieces. A week went by, then 2. I kept working. I kept the radio low and the doors open to let the smell of rubber and gasoline spill out onto the street, like it could wash the ache away. I slept in a dent in the mattress that still remembered the shape of her. My sister Claire dropped off lasagna and opinions. "She took the rocket ship," she said, shrugging. "You don't chase rockets. You keep your feet." The only thing I didn't toss was the little brass key on a bent ring. Safety deposit, box 314, Lakeview Savings. We got it 3 years before, the summer a landlord lost our birth certificates and social security cards in a moldy basement. She'd been the cautious one that day, tapping the pen against the contract, double-checking the fee. "It's not romantic," she'd said, "but it's safe." And we placed the envelope inside and locked it like a ritual. The banker sliding the box into the steel hive with a click you felt more than heard. 2 keys, one for her, one for me. The kind of grown-up redundancy you think you'll never need. I should have dropped the key into the river. I should have fed it to the floor drain at the shop and capped the grate with a story. Instead, I kept it in the kitchen junk drawer next to a coil of twine and a faded tape measure. Like some small, stubborn part of me was waiting for the future to remember my name. The future arrived on a Tuesday, 6 months later, in the sound of tires crunching gravel in front of my bay doors. October air, cold enough to nip the lungs and wake the old griefs. I was elbow-deep in a Subaru with a rotten exhaust, the smell of rust and hot coolant curling around me. When I looked up, Tessa was there, wind-cheeked, thin, wrapped in a long coat that didn't fit her memory. The sunlight cut behind her and haloed the dust in the air until the whole shop looked like a photograph. "Nate," she said. The name hit like a dropped wrench. Heavy, loud. All the guys went quiet without meaning to. You could hear the compressor ticking in the corner, cooling down. I wiped my hands slowly. The rag felt like sandpaper against my skin. I noticed the way she kept one hand hidden inside her coat, the way her jaw worked like she was chewing an answer before the question. She smelled like airport soap and a hotel hallway. Clean, far away, expensive. Thought you moved, I said. Her eyes flinched at that. Not guilt, not pride. Some third thing, like hunger, the sharp kind. I did. Congrats, I said. The word tasted like pennies. She looked past me at the Subaru, at the posters curling on the wall, at the calendar stuck on the wrong month. Her gaze landed on the coffee can where we collected bolts, then climbed back to me. Rain started to prick the shop apron outside, a light drum beat that made everything feel closer. I need your key, she said. No apology, no story, just those 4 words, flat and practical. I felt something slide into place inside me, a click that matched the sound of the banker's box returning to steel. My hand, without asking me, found my pocket, felt the old shape of the brass pressing against denim. What for? I asked. Because men like me require a reason the way engines require oil. Her throat moved. She finally pulled her left hand out of her coat, and I saw a shake she wasn't trying to hide. The lottery board flagged my ID. The originals, they're in the box. They won't release the annuity until I produce them in person. They need both keys. The rain thickened, tapping the metal roof in a steady beat. Behind me, someone coughed, and then found a reason to be somewhere else. The shop shrank until it was just me and her and the smell of wet concrete. And you came to me, I said. I didn't have anyone else to come to, she said, softer now. Not for this. I thought about the blue dress, the courthouse steps, the way she'd smiled like gravity had finally let go. The brass key in my pocket warmed against my palm like a coin just pulled from a sunlit dash. There was a time I would have handed it over without thinking. There was a time I would have followed her to the bank and called it fate. I closed my fist around the key. It felt small. It felt like everything I'd learned. Okay, I said, because I could feel the road unspooling in front of us, and I wanted to see where it went. Let's talk terms. We sat in my office, if you could call it that, a plywood desk, a rattling fan, and a window that stuck halfway open. The smell of gasoline lingered in the air, sharp enough to sting the throat. Tessa kept her coat on, knees together, eyes flicking toward the parking lot like she might bolt if I moved too fast. I poured her a paper cup of coffee from the pot that had been burning since 6 a.m. She didn't touch it. So, I said, setting the cup in front of her, you walk out of my life with half the furniture and the good towels. You win $30 million. You move God knows where. Now you're back because of a safety deposit box we opened when we still believed in joint checking accounts. Does that sound about right? She didn't argue, just pressed her lips together and nodded once. Her hair was shorter now, neat, expensive. I could smell the faint trace of perfume she always wore, the one that used to get on my jackets. It hit like memory and regret mixed together. I know what it looks like, she said finally. It looks like desperation, I said. She winced. It's not like that. They froze my payout because the ID I gave the board had discrepancies. I hired people to fix it, but the originals, birth certificate, license, even the first bank letter, are in that box, and the bank requires both keys to open it. You have the second. Her voice trembled just enough to sound human again. But I'd learned to hear more than words. She wasn't just nervous. She was scared. What happens if you don't get them? I asked. She hesitated, then met my eyes. I lose access to the money. The words hung there between us, simple and enormous. I leaned back in the chair, its springs complaining. And what's in it for me? Her mouth opened, then closed. The kind of pause that stretches thin, like metal about to snap. Nate, I'm not here to make deals. That's funny, I said, because you sound like a woman who came to negotiate. She drew a slow breath. What do you want? It wasn't the question itself. It was the way she said it, like she was bracing for some kind of revenge, like she thought I'd spent months plotting to humiliate her. Truth was, I hadn't thought that far ahead. My life had just been small without her, quieter, but steady, and I'd come to like steady. I don't want money, I said, though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. Then what? I want honesty. I want to know why you left the way you did, why you couldn't even say goodbye. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw the woman I'd fallen for, back before lottery tickets and news cameras. Because I didn't think I'd have the strength to stay gone if I saw your face again. The fan creaked behind me, pushing warm air across the room. That's your excuse? I said quietly. You left a note for your landlord but not for me? She looked down at her hands. You wouldn't have let me go. You would have made promises. You always did. And I needed to start over before the money changed everything. I laughed once, dry and sharp. Looks like it still changed everything. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. You don't understand. I thought the money would fix me. I thought if I left before it ruined us, maybe we'd both survive it. Adir, outside, a car horn blared, breaking the tension for a second. I turned toward the window, the light slicing through the dust. And now? I asked. Now I'm realizing it ruined me anyway. For a while, we just sat there, the hum of the fan filling the space between us. Where are you staying? I asked. At a motel off Route 12, she said. They think I'm some kind of celebrity. I told them I was visiting family. You still lie easily, I said. She didn't deny it. Will you come with me to the bank? I'll think about it, I said. She rose slowly, her coat brushing the chair. At the door, she turned back. You used to believe in second chances. Yeah, I said. Then I watched you buy one and spend it all at once. When she was gone, I stood by the window and watched the rain bead on her car's hood. She sat there for a long moment before driving off, the taillights fading into the gray. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Older, meaner, quieter. I opened the desk drawer and took out the key. It caught the light, dull and scratched. For a second I imagined what it would feel like to walk into that bank beside her, to see her face when the box slid open. Then I closed my hand around it and whispered, "Not yet," because I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. By the time I locked up the shop that night, the rain had stopped but left everything slick and shining under the streetlights. The air smelled like wet asphalt and cold metal. I drove past the diner, the post office, the old movie theater that hadn't changed its marquee in 3 years. Small-town ghosts, all of them. The kind that stayed loyal because they had nowhere else to go. I told myself I was just taking the long way home. But halfway down Route 12, my headlights caught the blue neon of the Pine Ridge Motel, and before I could think twice, I pulled into the lot. Tessa's car was easy to spot. A silver Lexus that looked like it had never seen a gravel road in its life. I parked 2 spaces over and killed the engine. For a minute I just sat there listening to the tick of the cooling motor. The motel's neon buzzed, washing the lot in tired light. Room 7's curtains glowed faintly. She was inside. I shouldn't have gone in. Every sensible part of me knew that. But curiosity can be louder than reason, especially when it wears a familiar face. I climbed out, my boots scraping the damp concrete, and walked up to the door. My reflection swam in the window's dark glass. I knocked once. She opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Her hair was loose, eyes rimmed red. The coat was gone, replaced by a soft sweater that looked like something from a life I'd never been invited into. "Nate," she breathed, relief and surprise tangled in that one syllable. "You came." "Yes, I did." She stepped aside, and I entered. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and motel linen. Cheap, sterile, temporary. Her purse lay open on the table beside a half-empty bottle of white wine and a crumpled stack of papers. "You always did like following bad instincts," she said, trying to make it sound like a joke. "Yeah, well, I'm consistent," I replied, closing the door behind me. We stood there, 2 people orbiting the same silence. I noticed the trembling in her hands when she reached for her glass. "You look tired," I said. "I haven't slept," she admitted. "The lawyers, the reporters, it's all been complicated?" She nodded. "Turns out winning the lottery doesn't make the rest of life disappear. It just puts it under a brighter light." I leaned against the dresser, crossing my arms. "So what's really going on, Tessa? Why now? Why me?" Her gaze lifted slowly, steadying on mine. "Because I don't trust anyone else." I wanted to believe that. God help me, I did. But there was something off in her tone. A hesitation buried deep, like a loose wire sparking behind drywall. She walked over to the table, picked up one of the papers, and handed it to me. It was a bank letter, dated last week. Notice of suspension. Account verification required. They froze everything, she said quietly. The main account, the trust, even the safe deposit renewal. Apparently someone's been using my identity to transfer money overseas. I scanned the document, my pulse starting to climb. Someone's stealing from you? Maybe. Or maybe they think I'm stealing from myself. The words didn't make sense until I saw the small print at the bottom. Pending investigation into fraudulent activity. Who would do that? I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, I think it's the man I hired to manage the money. He's been pressuring me, calling, showing up at my condo. When I stopped answering, he started threatening to leak things. Old debts, things I owed before the lottery. I stared at her, the puzzle rearranging itself in real time. So this isn't just about your ID. You're running from someone. Her eyes darted to the window. You always saw through me too fast. Not fast enough, apparently, I muttered. She crossed her arms, hugging herself. I just need that box opened, Nate. Then I can prove who I am, cut him off, and disappear again. I'll make it right with you, I swear. You think I care about the money? I think you care about being lied to. That hit hard. She wasn't wrong. Then stop lying, I said. Tell me the truth about everything. About him. About why you left. About what's in that box besides a couple of documents. Her mouth opened, but before she could answer there was a knock at the door. 3 short raps, precise and cold. She froze. Oh God, he found me. My pulse thudded in my ears. Who? She didn't answer, just looked at me with wide eyes, motioning toward the bathroom. Please, hide. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to demand answers. But something in her expression, a raw, terrified plea, made me move. I slipped into the bathroom. The door cracked just enough for a sliver of light. The door opened. Footsteps. A man's voice, smooth but sharp-edged. You've been ignoring my calls, Tessa. I told you I just need time, she said. He laughed quietly. Time's expensive, sweetheart. You know that better than anyone. I couldn't see him, but his tone painted the picture. Confident, dangerous, the kind of man who thought money bought silence. Then I heard the sound of paper, something being slapped onto the table. You sign this, he said, and all your problems disappear. Tessa's voice cracked. And if I don't? Then I tell the world how you won. My jaw tightened. Whatever game this was, I was already in it. When the door finally closed behind him, I stepped out. Tessa stood there shaking, her eyes wet. What does he mean, how you won? I asked. She looked at me, lips parted but no sound came out. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't wanted to see. Tessa hadn't just left because of the money. She'd left because of what she'd done to get it. She sank onto the edge of the bed, both hands trembling in her lap. The papers the man had left fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. I stood by the window, watching his car tail lights fade into the highway fog. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush the room. Tessa, I said, my voice low. What did he mean by that? How you won? She didn't answer at first, just stared down at her fingers, twisting the thin gold ring she still wore on her right hand. A nervous habit she used to have when she couldn't tell the truth. Finally, she whispered, "The ticket wasn't mine." I felt something cold move through my chest. "Say that again." She swallowed hard. "It belonged to a woman I worked with, at the catering job. Her name was Jolene. She was older, took care of her sick mom. The night before the drawing, she forgot her purse at the venue. I found it while cleaning up. There was a lottery ticket inside." I said nothing. The hum of the motel refrigerator was the only sound. "She came by the next morning looking for it," Tessa continued. "I told her I didn't see it. And then, that night the numbers hit. 30 million. My name was the one on the claim." She looked up at me then, eyes red, raw, and pleading. "It was supposed to fix everything, Nate. I was tired of watching you break your back at the garage. Tired of scraping together rent, of pretending we weren't sinking. I told myself I'd make it right later, that I'd find her, give her something. But once it started, once the cameras showed up, it was too late." My hand clenched against the window frame. "You stole it." I borrowed it," she said weakly. "I thought I could build something good with it, for both of us. But when I saw how you looked at me after the press conference, like I was someone else, I panicked. I ran." I turned from her, my reflection caught in the glass. The old scar on my jaw ghosted by the light. You ran because you knew what you did. Because money that big doesn't come clean. I know, she whispered. And now he knows too. The man from before? She nodded. His name's Kane. He worked for the Lottery Commission at first, some kind of junior accountant who checked claims. He figured it out months ago, said he could bury it for a price. I paid him. Then he came back for more. And now? He wants me to sign the rights to a trust in his name. If I don't, he says he'll take the proof to the board. I let out a long breath. The air felt thin, like the room had lost its oxygen. And that's why you need the box. Yes, she said. Because the only proof the ticket was Jolene's is locked inside. Her ID, her address, everything. I kept it, Nate. I don't even know why. Maybe guilt, maybe insurance. I stared at her. The woman I'd once thought was my whole future was now asking me to help her bury a theft. You could turn yourself in, I said quietly. She shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. If I do, Kane walks away clean. He'll deny everything, and I'll go to prison. Please, Nate, just help me open that box. I'll fix it after. After what? I asked. After you disappear again? She stood suddenly, crossing the space between us. The scent of her perfume, vanilla and something sharper, hit me like a memory I didn't want. She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. I never stopped caring about you, she said. Not for 1 second. I just didn't know how to love you and live with what I'd done. Her voice cracked and the tears finally came. I hated that it still hit me, that the sound of her crying still pulled something deep inside. I pulled my hand away and walked to the table, picking up the papers Kane had left. Legal documents, notarized, cold and precise. His name stamped at the bottom. A transfer of assets. Tessa, I said, setting the papers down carefully. If this man's threatening you, he's not going to stop even if you give him what he wants. What choice do I have? She said through her tears. You could fight him. You could stop running. She gave a broken laugh. And do what? Stand in front of a judge and admit I stole a woman's dream? I didn't answer. Outside, a semi roared past, shaking the thin motel windows. When I looked back at her, she seemed smaller somehow. Not the woman who'd stood on those courthouse steps in that blue dress, but someone deflated by her own choices. Do you still have the ticket? I asked. Her gaze flicked to her purse. A copy. The original's in the box. That was when I made the decision. Maybe not the smart one, maybe not the right one, but the kind men like me make when they can't stand by and watch someone drown, even if they jumped in on their own. Tomorrow morning, I said. We go to the bank. Her breath hitched. You'll help me? I nodded once. But after that, I decide what happens next. You understand? She wiped her cheeks, nodded. Whatever you say. I started for the door. The rain had stopped again, the air heavy with the smell of wet pavement and pine. Nate, she said softly behind me, why are you doing this? I didn't turn around. Because someone's got to make sure you don't sink twice. As I stepped into the night, I knew I was walking straight into trouble. But I also knew this time, I was the one holding the key. Morning came gray and cold, the kind of sky that never fully wakes up. I barely slept, kept seeing that brass key glinting on the nightstand, like it was daring me to use it. By 7, I was standing outside the diner, sipping burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup, while Tessa's Lexus pulled into the lot. She stepped out wearing sunglasses and a scarf that tried too hard to hide her. Her hair was pulled back tight, and the exhaustion in her face was the kind you couldn't cover with makeup. When she saw me, she hesitated, as if half expecting I'd change my mind. You ready? I asked. She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. As I'll ever be. We drove in silence. The roads were still damp, the tires humming over the slick asphalt. Every few miles, she'd steal a glance at me, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. I didn't help her. The air between us was thick with all the words we'd avoided for years. Lakeview Savings sat on the corner of Main and Broad, a red brick building that hadn't changed since the day we first walked in together. The brass handles gleamed, the flags flapped lazily in the wind, and inside, it smelled like paper and lemon polish. The teller recognized us, or maybe just remembered the awkward energy of two people pretending to be fine. She smiled the polite, professional smile of someone paid not to ask questions. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you?" I reached into my pocket, pulled out the key and placed it on the counter. "We'd like to access safe deposit box 314. She nodded and called for the manager, a tall man with a silver tie clip and the slow confidence of someone who'd seen too many secrets stored behind steel. He checked our IDs, matched the signatures, and led us down the hallway toward the vault. The sound changed as we went deeper. The carpet gave way to tile, our footsteps echoing. The air grew colder, sharper, with that metallic tang only banks seem to have. The vault door loomed ahead, a massive wheel of brushed steel and bolts thick enough to stop time. The manager turned the wheel, the mechanism groaning softly. When it opened, the air that escaped smelled like dust and old paper. Rows of boxes lined the walls like tombs. He stopped at ours, inserted his master key, and looked at us expectantly. "Both keys, please." Tessa's hand shook slightly as she produced hers from her purse. The manager slid them in, turned them together, and withdrew the small gray box. "Take your time," he said before leaving us alone. The heavy door clanged shut behind him, sealing us in with the sound of our own breathing. Tessa placed the box on the table, her hands trembling. "You want to do it?" she asked. I nodded. The lock turned easily. The lid lifted with a soft click. Inside lay a neatly folded manila envelope, thick and worn at the corners. Beneath it, a few smaller items, an old photograph of us at the lake, 2 rings in a plastic bag, and a lottery receipt printed on faded thermal paper. Tessa's breath hitched as I lifted the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. I opened it and slid the contents out. Birth certificates, a social security card, a letter with the logo of the Ohio State Lottery Commission, and then another envelope, smaller, unmarked. I handed it to her. "What's that?" Her fingers hovered over it. "Jolene's letter," she whispered. I kept it. It was in her purse, addressed to her mother. I never mailed it. Something in me tightened. "Read it." She hesitated, then unfolded the paper. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "Mama, if this ticket hits, we'll finally be free. You can quit cleaning rooms and I'll take you anywhere you want to go. Maybe the ocean. You always wanted to see it. I love you, Jolene." The words hit like a punch. The room felt smaller, colder. Tessa folded the letter carefully, hands shaking. I told myself I'd make it right, that I'd find her, but she died 2 months after the draw. Heart failure. I read it in the paper. I looked at the box again. The weight of secrets measured in paper and guilt. "You could still make it right," I said. "Give it back. Set up something in her name." She shook her head, tears blurring her voice. "You think I haven't tried? Every time I tried to fix it, someone else wanted a piece. Kane, the lawyers, even my so-called friends. They smell blood when they see money. I just wanted one clean start." I closed the box slowly. "Money doesn't clean anything. It just shows where the dirt was." She wiped her cheeks. "So what now? You have the key. You could take it all to the police." I studied her for a long moment. "I could," I said, "but I won't." Her eyes widened. "Why not?" "Because you don't need punishment," I said quietly. "You need redemption. And that doesn't start with handcuffs. It starts with truth." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" I slid the envelope toward her. "We're going to Jolene's mother. We're giving her this letter, and a share of the money. All of it, if she asks." She shook her head in disbelief. "Nate, you can't be serious." "I am," I said firmly. "You said you wanted a clean start. This is the only way you'll ever get it." She stared at me, the fight draining from her shoulders. Finally, she nodded, slowly, painfully. "All right," she said. "I'll do it." We placed everything back in the box, locked it, and handed it to the manager on our way out. He gave us that polite, empty smile again. "All set?" "Yeah," I said. "All set." Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. The air smelled new, like wet earth warming after a storm. Tessa stood beside me, her face pale but lighter somehow, as if something long buried had started to lift. "I never thought you'd forgive me," she said softly. I looked at her, then at the street beyond us, where people walked with their heads down, chasing their own small hopes. "I didn't," I said. but I might start trying. And for the first time in months, I meant it. We didn't talk much after leaving the bank. The drive west cut through farmland that looked washed clean by rain. Rows of soybeans glistening under a dull sky. The quiet between us wasn't angry anymore, just worn down, like an old road where the gravels finally settled. Tessa traced circles on the fogged window with her fingertip. She lived near Springfield, she said finally. Last I checked, her mom still had the same address. Still keeping track? I asked. I guess guilt makes you good at remembering. I glanced at her. You ready for this? No, she said. But I think it's time I stop running. The GPS led us down a narrow street lined with faded mailboxes and leaning porches. Her house was small, white paint peeling, a flag hanging limp on the post. A wind chime clinked softly as we stepped out. Tessa clutched the envelope like it might burn her. I waited by the car, letting her go first. She hesitated, then climbed the porch steps and knocked. A frail woman answered. Gray hair, cardigan buttoned wrong, eyes sharp despite the years. Can I help you? She asked. Tessa's voice wavered. You don't know me, ma'am. But I knew your daughter, Jolene. The woman's hand flew to her chest. Jolene? God, it's been years. Tessa nodded, tears slipping free. She left something behind. A letter. The old woman reached out with shaking fingers, taking the paper like it was holy. As she read, her lips trembled into a smile that looked like both pain and peace. She really wanted to see the ocean, she whispered. Tessa wiped her face. I want to make sure you do. I can help with that. The woman looked up, confused. Why would you do that? Because it's what Jolene wanted, Tessa said. I stayed on the porch steps, hands in my jacket pockets, watching the two of them. For the first time since Tessa showed up at my shop, I saw something break open inside her. Not fear, not guilt, just release. When we drove away, she was quiet, staring out at the horizon. I didn't deserve her forgiveness, she said finally. Maybe not, I said, but you gave her peace. That's something. She turned to me, eyes wet but steady. Nate, what happens to us now? I thought about it. The road stretching ahead, the air clearing, the sound of tires humming beneath us. Let's just drive for a while, I said. See where it takes us. For the first time in years, neither of us needed to know the destination. We stopped at a roadside motel just outside Dayton, one of those places where the sign flickers, and the rooms smell faintly of cigarette smoke no matter how much air freshener they use. It felt fitting, a place between endings and beginnings. Tessa showered first. I sat on the edge of the bed, the old mattress groaning under my weight, flipping through TV channels I wasn't really watching. The low hum of the air conditioner filled the room like white noise, steady and cold. When she came out, she wore a plain gray hoodie, her hair damp, face bare. For once, she didn't look like the woman who'd won $30 million. She just looked human. Can I ask you something? She said, sitting on the other bed. Sure. Naughty. Why didn't you hate me? I let out a small laugh. Who says I didn't? She smiled faintly. Then why help me? I thought about it. Because I loved you once, and maybe that means seeing you through the worst of it, even if I can't love you the same way again. The silence after that was soft, almost gentle. Outside, a truck rumbled past, its headlights sliding across the thin curtains. Tessa watched them fade, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know who I am without the money anymore. Maybe that's a good thing, I said. You get to find out. She looked over at me, eyes tired but alive. And you? What do you want now? I stared at the wall for a moment, then answered honestly. Peace, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else. For the first time, she nodded like she understood. Later, when she fell asleep, I stepped outside. The air was cool, and the sky was just starting to hint at dawn, pale light stretching over the trees. I leaned against the railing, listening to the distant hum of the highway. It hit me then. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to stop bleeding over an old wound. When I went back inside, Tessa was asleep on top of the blanket, one hand resting on the envelope that had started it all. Her breathing was slow even. I turned off the lamp, lay back, and let the morning light crawl across the room. For the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt to close my eyes. The sun was barely up when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, still half asleep, the screen lighting the dim room. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then something in my gut told me to answer. "Yeah?" I muttered. A pause. Then a voice I recognized instantly. "Kane." "Well, well," he said, slick and calm. "Looks like you've been playing hero. How's our runaway millionaire?" My body tensed. I turned slightly. Tessa was still asleep, her hair spread across the pillow, peaceful for the first time since I'd seen her. "What do you want?" I asked quietly. "What I'm owed," he said. "You think a little road trip's going to fix what she stole? You've got no idea how deep this goes." I stepped out onto the balcony, shutting the door behind me. The morning air bit at my skin, cold and sharp. "You followed us?" "I don't need to," he said. "She called her bank this morning. Routine check. I have friends there." "You're bluffing." He laughed softly. "You think I don't know where she is? Nate, I've been cleaning up people like her for years. You're not the first guy who thinks he can save a pretty liar." That hit a nerve. I gripped the railing. "You come near her, and you'll regret it." "Oh, I don't need to come near her. I just need to make one phone call. To the lottery board, to the press. Tell them about the stolen ticket. You know how fast a story like that burns?" I said nothing. The morning traffic droned in the distance, the sound of an ordinary world carrying on. "What do you want?" I asked finally. He paused long enough for me to hear his smirk. "Half. You convince her to sign that trust, wire half to me, and we all walk away clean. Otherwise, she loses everything. And maybe you do too." The line clicked dead before I could answer. I stood there for a moment, staring out at the pale horizon. The motel's neon sign flickered off as daylight took over. Inside, I could hear Tessa stirring, murmuring my name. When I turned back, I already knew I couldn't tell her about the call. Not yet. Not until I knew what he really wanted. Because Kane wasn't just after the money. He wanted control, and I wasn't about to hand it to him. I pocketed the phone and stepped back inside, forcing a smile. "Morning," Tessa said sleepily. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Everything's fine." But in my chest, I could already feel the storm starting again. I spent most of that day pretending everything was fine. We grabbed coffee at a diner off the highway, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and napkin dispensers that never worked right. Tessa smiled for the first time in days. Small, fragile, but real. While she talked about maybe driving west, maybe finding a quiet town where no one knew her name, I couldn't stop replaying Kane's voice in my head. Half. His tone wasn't bluff, it was a warning. After breakfast, I excused myself to make a call. Instead, I went behind the diner to the payphone. The kind no one uses anymore but still worked if you knew how to feed it coins right. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Claire?" My sister's voice came on, surprised. "Nate? God, it's been months. What's going on?" "I need a favor," I said. "Quiet one." She sighed. "That doesn't sound good. I need you to look up someone for me. Guy named Marcus Kane. Used to work for the State Lottery Commission in Columbus. I think he's dirty." She didn't even ask why. "Give me an hour." When I returned to the table, Tessa was stirring her coffee, lost in thought. "I was thinking," she said softly, "about Jolene's mom. Maybe I should set up a fund for her. Something real." "That's a good idea," I said, meaning it. She smiled faintly. "Feels strange doing something honest." An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Kane. Fired 2 hours ago. Fraud investigation. Changed name twice. Connected to 2 shell companies in Cincinnati. Stay away. Dangerous." I read it twice, jaw tightening. When I looked up, Tessa was watching me. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, slipping the phone back in my pocket. "We should keep moving." We drove south, back roads winding through bare trees. Every car behind us made me tense. Every intersection felt like a setup. By late afternoon, I pulled into a small-town motel. Different place, same flickering neon. Tessa looked at me, uneasy. "Why here?" "Just tired," I lied. Truth was, I needed time to think. Kane wasn't bluffing, and if he knew where we were once, he'd find us again. That night I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the envelope on the table. It was everything. Proof, guilt, leverage. I pulled out the lottery receipt, running my thumb over the faded numbers. Then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Tiny initials scribbled in pen at the top corner, J.H. Jolene's handwriting, and under it, faint but legible, a second set of initials, M.K. Marcus Kane. My blood went cold. He hadn't just found out after she won. He'd been there from the beginning. I looked over at Tessa, asleep by the window, her breathing slow and even. For the first time, I realized she hadn't been the only one caught in something dirty. She'd just been the easiest one to blame, and if I didn't move fast, she'd pay for all of it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat awake until the motel's corridor lights clicked off, thinking about the initials and the way a small pen mark can change everything. The room felt too small for the two of us and the secret we were carrying. Dawn came thin and gray, and I drove us out before the coffee even kicked in. "You look like you haven't slept," Tessa said, rubbing her eyes as we merged onto the highway. "Because I haven't," I said. "We need to do this my way now." I didn't explain. People who get themselves into trouble don't like to know every step. They prefer to be surprised. First stop, Claire's place. I needed records. Anything tying Kane to shell companies, to the lottery office, to anyone who could corroborate the initials. Claire met me at her kitchen table with a stack of printouts and a look that said she'd been waiting for this fight. "Marcus Kane has been laundering names for years," she said, tapping a spreadsheet. "He uses people like molasses. Slow, sticky, impossible to scrub off until you pry it loose." Chati. She handed me an old photo pulled from a court document. Kane at a charity event, hand casually on the shoulder of a man from the Lottery Commission. The background blurred into a story I'd only half believed until then. "What if we go public?" Tessa blurted, voice trembling. "If we take this to the paper, to the board, they'll have to investigate." "That's a double-edged wrench," Claire said. "Public drama will drag Jolene's name through mud again. But private evidence, solid, legal, can flip the table without making a circus." I thought of Jolene's letter, of the way the old woman had smiled. I thought of the man who called me cowboy and tried to buy my silence. "We collect proof," I said. "We don't shout yet," Claire nodded. "I can file FOIA requests, pull archived complaints, track payments. But it'll take time." She met my eyes, steady. "You sure you want to play the slow game?" "We don't have a choice," I said. "Kane's got reach. We move wrong, he cuts our legs out." Tessa listened, folding her hands until her knuckles went white. "I want to help. I'll sign whatever affidavit. I'll go on record about Jolene. I'll do it clean." We left with a plan that smelled like cold coffee and stubbornness. My hands shook when I lit a cigarette. Habit, more than need, and I watched the smoke curl like a question mark. The shop felt different the day I drove back. The open bay doors like a mouth waiting for talk. I went through the motions, lifted a hood, tightened a bolt, while waiting for Claire's messages to land. By afternoon, she called with the first breadcrumb, a canceled check from a shell company, signed with Kane's initials, routed through a small firm with links to a Cincinnati address. She sent me a PDF with the memo line highlighted: consulting, claims verification, translation, the job he used to orchestrate the theft. I printed everything and stuffed it in a folder labeled in my head evidence. When Tessa saw it, her hand hovered over the papers, like a woman reaching for a cliff edge who meant to step carefully. "We get a lawyer," I said. "Someone who won't fold when he gets the phone call." She nodded. "I don't want the headlines, Nate. I just want the truth out." The choice felt smaller when you put it in those terms. The lawyers I knew were greasy suits who smelled like old cologne and fear. The one Claire found was different, clean, precise. A woman named Layla with a reputation for making crooked men nervous. Her office smelled of lemon and determination. Layla didn't do theatrics. She looked through the folder once, twice, then leaned back. "You're walking into a minefield," she said. "Kane's not a man, he's a network, but networks have weak threads. We pull at a thread, we can unravel him." "How do we avoid a circus?" I asked. "We build a paper trail, and we freeze his options. We notify the board quietly, file an injunction if he touches the funds, and prepare a press release that goes out only if he makes a public move." She set a timeline: FOIA results, subpoenas, bank cooperation. It was the slow, surgical thing Claire had suggested. Tessa exhaled like a person shedding years. "I can make a statement," she said. "About Jolene. About the ticket." Layla watched her with the kind of attention that makes people honest. "We'll protect you as best we can," she promised. "But you must be honest, in full." She said it like a bargain. Tessa swallowed and nodded. The truth was a hard slab of wood, and she placed it on the table like payment. That night, we drove out of town in silence, the folder between us. The highway hummed like an engine with promise. I kept my hand on the wheel and my eyes on the road, thinking that this, paper and law and the slow mechanical grind of justice, was how men like me keep people safe. Not with punches, not with threats, but with paperwork that can't be bribed. We were walking a tightrope, but this time I had both anchors, the key to the past and the stubbornness to not let it define the future. We stayed in the same motel that night. Different room, same tired wallpaper. I didn't unpack. The folder sat on the nightstand, a quiet bomb waiting for morning. Tessa paced the carpet while I watched the headlights sweep across the curtains. "Do you think this lawyer can really stop him?" she asked. "She's the kind that doesn't bluff," I said. "If Kane makes a move, it'll backfire fast." She sat down beside me, twisting her hands. "I keep wondering how it would have gone if I'd just turned that ticket in to Jolene myself." "You'd still be broke," I said. "But you'd be sleeping at night." She gave a dry laugh, then looked toward the window. "I'd trade the money for peace." "Good," I said, "because that's all we're trying to buy now." It was close to midnight when the knock came. 3 short taps, sharp, deliberate. I froze. Tessa's eyes went wide. "It's him!" I motioned for her to stay back, then moved toward the door. "Who is it?" I called. A pause, then a woman's voice. "Layla Grant." I cracked the door open. She stood there in a trench coat, rain on her shoulders, a manila envelope tucked under one arm. "Sorry for the late visit," she said. "I didn't trust email." I let her in. Tessa looked relieved but wary. Layla set the envelope down and opened it. Inside was a printout of a wire transfer record. Marcus Kane's name, time-stamped less than 2 hours earlier. The destination account, offshore. The source? Tessa's trust fund. "He moved early," Layla said. "He must have known we were building a case." My stomach sank. "How much?" "Half," she said. "Exactly half, just like he threatened." Tessa covered her mouth, shaking her head. "No, I changed the passwords. I froze the cards." "He didn't need the cards," Layla said. "He forged a standing authorization with your signature, probably one you gave him months ago. The board caught it too late." "So it's gone?" I asked. "Not entirely," Layla said. "We can freeze the receiving account, but we have to move fast. I just need you both to sign this affidavit tonight." She slid the papers across the table, her pen ready. Tessa's hands trembled as she signed. When it was my turn, I didn't hesitate. My signature looked harder than I felt. Layla gathered the papers, sealing them back in the envelope. "I'll file first thing in the morning. If the bank cooperates, we can stop the transfer before it clears." "Why?" As she turned to leave, I asked, "And if we can't?" She looked at me with that lawyer calm that hides more than it says. "Then you both need to decide what matters more, recovering the money or staying alive." The door shut softly behind her. Tessa sat in silence, her face pale. "He's not going to stop, is he?" I looked out the window. The rain had started again, soft and steady, blurring the neon light. "No," I said, "but neither are we." I locked the door, slid the chain across and sat beside her. "Tomorrow," I said, "we end this." And this time, I meant it. By sunrise, the rain had stopped, leaving the parking lot slick and silver. I loaded the folder, the key, and a half-empty thermos into the truck. Tessa stood by the door, pale but steady, wearing that same gray hoodie from the night before. Layla met us downtown, in front of a small courthouse annex that smelled like old paper and wet concrete. She looked wired but sharp, a folder under her arm, her phone buzzing every few seconds. "They froze the transfer," she said without preamble. "But only for 48 hours. Kane's lawyers are already challenging it. We have to get him in front of a judge before it clears." "And how do we do that?" I asked. Layla's lips twitched into a thin smile. "We bait him." Tessa frowned. "You mean, talk to him?" Exactly. He's not hiding. He's waiting for leverage. If he thinks you're willing to deal, he'll come to you. I've arranged a neutral meeting space at a bank branch downtown. Security cameras, witnesses, paper trail. All we need is for him to show. I didn't like the sound of it, but it was the only way forward. You think he'll bite? He's arrogant, Layla said. He'll think he's still in control. By noon, we were sitting in a glass-walled conference room at First Federal Bank. The room smelled like disinfectant and tension. Tessa sat across from me, staring at her reflection in the table's surface. Her fingers tapped softly, rhythm out of sync with her breathing. At 12:17, he arrived. Marcus Kane looked exactly like the kind of man who believed rules were for other people. Perfect suit, smug half-smile, phone in one hand. He greeted the bank manager like an old friend before turning to us. "Tessa," he said, voice smooth as glass. "You look well. Nervous, but well." She didn't respond. I stood. "Let's keep this simple, Kane. You've got money that isn't yours. You're going to sign it back." He laughed lightly, setting his phone down. "And here I thought we might do this like adults. But sure, play the hero." Layla slid a folder across the table. "These documents include evidence of fraudulent authorizations, offshore transfers, and your prior disciplinary record from the commission. The judge already has a copy." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. A small, fast calculation. "You think this will stick? It already has," Layla said. "Unless you want federal charges, you'll sign the reversal and a statement of withdrawal." He leaned back, studying her, then me. "You know what the problem with honest people is, Nate?" he said. "You don't know when you've already lost." And before anyone could react, he reached for his phone and pressed a button. The bank alarms didn't go off, but my phone buzzed. A new email notification. Subject line, "Confession file." Tessa's eyes widened as she opened hers. "He recorded us," she whispered. Kane smiled. "I've got everything. Her admission about the ticket, her deal with Jolene's letter, your threats to me. You leak my name, I leak yours. It's all one click away." The smugness in his face made my fists tighten. But I didn't move. That's what he wanted. Layla didn't blink. "You just committed wire fraud again," she said calmly. "You transmitted an extortion threat through federal servers. You might want to read the fine print on your own crimes." Kane's smile faltered. That was when two men in plain suits entered the room. U.S. Marshals, badges out, calm and efficient. Layla stood. "You're under federal investigation, Mr. Kane. You can tell your story to them." The look on his face wasn't anger. It was disbelief, like a gambler who'd just realized the deck had been stacked against him the whole time. They cuffed him quietly, his phone slipping from his hand onto the table with a dull thud. Tessa sat frozen, eyes wide, breathing uneven. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "It's over," I said quietly. "You did it." Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, cutting bright lines across the courthouse steps. Layla turned to us, smiling faintly. "The board's agreed to return what's left of your funds. Clean. No more middlemen." Tessa let out a shaky laugh. "I don't even want it anymore." "Then maybe use it right this time," I said. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe I finally will." As we walked out into the sunlight, the glass doors swung shut behind us with a sound like finality. And for the first time since she'd shown up at my garage, I felt something new in the air. Quiet, steady, and earned. Peace. The story hit the local news 2 days later. Former state employee arrested in lottery fraud probe. They showed Kane's photo for all of 10 seconds. His smirk gone, replaced by the flat stare of a man out of luck. They didn't mention Tessa's name. That was Layla's doing. Quiet power working behind the scenes. We watched the report from a diner booth on the edge of town. The place smelled like bacon grease and burnt toast, and the waitress poured coffee without asking. Tessa sat across from me, wrapped in one of my flannels, hair tied back, her eyes fixed on the TV until the screen switched to weather. "So that's it," she said softly. "He's gone." "Yeah," I said. "Paper trail's clean. They'll find the rest of his shell companies by next week." She stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against the cup. "You think Jolene's mom will ever know the truth?" "She doesn't need to," I said. She's got her piece. You gave her that. Tessa nodded. Quiet. Feels strange. Like I've been holding my breath for years and finally let it out. That's what redemption sounds like, I said. For a while we didn't talk, just sat there in the small hum of the morning rush, the smell of frying onions, the clatter of plates. Outside, the sky had finally turned blue again. No clouds, no threat of rain. When the check came, she reached for it. I put my hand over hers. My turn, I said. She smiled a little. You sure? You might go broke. Why? I've been broke before, I said. Didn't kill me. She laughed, the sound small but real. Later, we walked down Main Street, past the pawn shop and the barber that never changed its sign. She stopped at the window of a real estate office, staring at a photo of a small white house with a porch swing. You ever think about settling again? She asked. Sometimes, I said. But I'm not sure where yet. She looked up at me. Maybe somewhere quiet, near water. Maybe. We kept walking, side by side, not touching but close enough to feel the warmth through the cool air. When we reached the corner, she stopped. Nate, I don't know what happens now. I can't fix everything I broke. You don't have to, I said. Just don't break yourself trying. Her eyes softened. Do you still hate me? I thought about that. The nights I spent waiting, the silence, the key in my pocket, the sound of her voice when she came back. No, I said finally. I don't. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. We parted there, at the crosswalk, her walking one way, me the other. She turned back once, just before she disappeared around the corner, and gave me a small wave. I raised my hand in return, the sun warm on my back, the world finally quiet. The brass key still hung from my keyring, worn and dull, a reminder of what we'd been through. I thought about throwing it away, but I didn't. Some things you keep, not because you need them, but because they remind you how far you've come. When I climbed into my truck and turned the engine over, the sound was steady, alive. I rolled down the window and let the wind rush in. For the first time in years, the road ahead didn't look like an escape. It looked like a beginning. A week later, an envelope showed up at the garage. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. I stood in the doorway with grease on my hands and the smell of diesel in the air, staring at it like it might vanish if I blinked. Inside was a letter, folded twice, neat as always. Nate, I'm heading west. There's a small town outside Santa Fe that needs a bakery manager. Can you believe that? After all this time, I might finally get back to doing what I loved before everything went wrong. The lawyers finished the settlement. The money that was mine, what's left of it, is going into a foundation in Jolene's name. Scholarships for women like her, trying to start over. I thought maybe that's what she would have wanted. You once told me that money shows where the dirt was. I think I finally get it. I can't clean what happened, but maybe I can grow something decent out of it. Thank you for not throwing me away when I gave you every reason to. You didn't save me, Nate. You reminded me I was worth saving myself. If you ever find your peace, come visit. There's a porch here, and the sunsets look like fire across the desert. Tessa. I read it 3 times before setting it down. The shop was quiet except for the radio playing low, some old Springsteen song about second chances and long roads. I turned the letter over and found something tucked inside. A small, square photo. Tessa standing in front of a dusty little storefront with a "Coming Soon" sign taped to the glass. Her smile wasn't forced this time. It was soft, easy, earned. For a minute I just stood there and let that image sink in. Then I folded the letter carefully and slid it into my wallet, right behind my old driver's license. Claire stopped by that afternoon with sandwiches. She spotted the photo sticking out. "She looks happy," she said. "Yeah," I said, smiling a little. "Guess she finally found her ocean." Claire leaned on the counter. "And you? You gonna keep wrenching bolts till you're 80? "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'll take a drive west when the weather turns." She smirked. "That right?" I shrugged. "Got a few things left to tune up first." After she left, I went back to work. The sun dropped low, turning the oil stains on the floor the color of rusted gold. I wiped my hands, closed the bay doors, and turned off the lights one by one. Before locking up, I took the brass key from my pocket and set it on the workbench. It caught the light one last time, a dull gleam against the wood. Then I left it there. Some things aren't meant to be carried forever. When I stepped outside, the air smelled of warm steel and fading summer. I started the truck and pulled onto the road, the horizon wide and open. And somewhere out there, past the miles of flat land and old regrets, the world was waiting. 3 months later, the first snow dusted the rooftops in Ohio, and I realized I was done with winters that froze more than just the ground. The garage had been running smooth. Steady business, bills paid, the kind of calm I once prayed for. But some quiets start to feel too heavy, like they're asking you to move. So one Friday, I closed up early, left the "Back Monday" sign on the door, and started driving west. The road stretched out long and clean, slicing through empty fields and quiet towns. The radio faded between stations, the static mixing with old country songs that sounded like memories I didn't know I still had. By the time I hit New Mexico, the air was thinner, warmer. The sky didn't end. It just kept going, the color of bruised copper and flame. Somewhere past Albuquerque, I saw the sign, "Welcome to Arroyo Mesa, population 3,214. It was smaller than I expected. Streets lined with adobe houses, kids riding bikes, wind chimes hanging from every porch. I found her bakery easily. Jolene's Rise and Bake. The name hit like a soft punch. The front windows were fogged from the ovens inside. I stood across the street for a moment, hands in my jacket pockets, watching through the glass. Tessa was behind the counter, her hair pulled back, laughing with a customer. She moved with the ease of someone who finally stopped looking over her shoulder. I almost turned around then. Some things are better left as stories you tell yourself on lonely drives. But before I could, she looked up and saw me. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she smiled, not surprised, not awkward, just that steady, grateful smile that says you made it. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped in. The smell hit me first. Fresh bread, cinnamon, coffee. It wrapped around me like a memory of every good morning I'd ever had. Tessa wiped her hands on her apron. "Took you long enough," she said softly. "Road was long," I replied. "Guess I had a few things to think about. You want coffee?" "Always." She poured me a cup, slid it across the counter. "How's Ohio?" "Colder than I remember." "Quieter too." She smiled faintly. "This place gets loud when the oven's full. You'd like it." I took a sip. It tasted like home somehow. "Looks like you're doing good." "Trying to," she said. "The scholarship fund's up. First student starts next fall. Jolene would have liked that." "Yeah," she said softly. "I think she would." We stood there for a moment, the hum of the kitchen filling the silence between us. Then she nodded toward a stool near the window. "Sit. You look like a man who's been on the road too long." I sat. The sun poured through the glass, warming my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing or escaping anything. She brought me a plate with a slice of warm bread and honey butter, the kind she used to make when life was simpler. I broke off a piece and smiled. "Still perfect," I said. "Finally learned to stop rushing it," she said. "Takes patience." I looked at her, really looked at her. The lines that weren't there before, the calm in her eyes. She'd changed. So had I. And maybe that was the point. Outside, a breeze pushed through the open door, carrying the scent of bread into the street. I watched her move behind the counter, light catching in her hair, and thought about how strange redemption looks when it finally arrives. Ordinary, quiet, and earned one day at a time. When she looked back and caught me staring, she smiled again. "You staying long?" I thought about it, then said, "Yeah, maybe I am." The desert woke early. Light spilled over the red mesas and brushed the storefronts gold, the air carrying that cool stillness right before the day gets hot. I'd been up since 5, sitting on the porch outside the bakery with a mug of coffee that tasted faintly of smoke and cinnamon. Across the street, shopkeepers opened their doors, sweeping dust from yesterday into today. The town was alive in its quiet way. Kids laughing somewhere down the block, a dog barking, the sound of a screen door slapping shut. I hadn't realized until then how much I'd missed mornings that didn't rush me. Tessa stepped out beside me, wiping her hands on a towel, her apron dusted with flour. The sunlight caught her hair, making it shine like copper. "You're up early," she said. Old habits, I replied. Engines and sunrises. Hard to turn either off. She leaned against the railing, watching the horizon. You ever think we'd end up here? Not in a million years, I said, smiling. But I'm glad we did. She laughed softly. Me too. We didn't talk for a while. Just watched the desert stretch awake. There was peace in the silence. The kind that doesn't need explaining. The bakery opened at 7 sharp. Locals drifted in. Ranchers, truck drivers, a young mom with a baby on her hip. They all knew her name. She handed out bread and smiles like she'd been doing it all her life. I stayed near the window sipping coffee, watching her work. The woman who'd once run from her mistakes was now rooted deep, steady, feeding people instead of fear. At one point she looked over and mouthed, "Thank you." I just nodded. Some words don't need to be said twice. Later that afternoon, we drove out past the edge of town, following a dirt road that wound up toward the ridge. She'd packed sandwiches and lemonade. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and warm dust. When we reached the overlook, the world opened wide. The valley below painted in rust and gold. The sky so blue it hurt to look at. We spread a blanket, ate in comfortable silence. You ever think about what's next? She asked. Not much, I said. For once, I'm fine with now. She smiled at that, turned her face to the sun. As the light began to fade, she rested her head on my shoulder. The air cooled, the wind softening to a hum. You know, she said, voice barely above a whisper. For years I thought everything I touched turned to ruin. And now? Now I think maybe it was just waiting for the right hands. I didn't say anything, just watched the sky bleed orange into pink, then purple. The kind of sunset that made promises you didn't need to test. When we drove back down, the first stars were out, scattered over the darkening horizon. She turned on the radio, some slow blues tune, and for the first time in a long time it felt like home. The key I'd once left behind stayed that way. I didn't need reminders anymore. The past had done its job. It got us here. And as the town lights blinked on below us, I realized something simple, something final. Redemption doesn't show up in grand gestures or clean slates. It shows up in the quiet mornings, the steady work, the people who stay. I reached over, took her hand, and she didn't pull away. The night swallowed the road behind us, but ahead was nothing but open sky. The end.